Okay, so I'm here with Steve Sechi. Is that the way you pronounce your name? I don't know. I should say it out loud.
It actually can be pronounced a lot of different ways. If you're using the original Sardinian version that had an extra C, it would be pronounced Seki.
Oh, okay.
But most people call me Sechi, or people don't know me call me Sechi. So any of them's good. Steve's probably the best way to go.
Okay, Steve. Well, so why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your latest project?
Okay, well, I am the designer of the Talislanta role-playing game. Since we probably got mostly a role-playing audience here, if you know me at all, that's where you would know me from. Um, just working on a new project. I'm just about to release a novel called Blood Vendetta, which is a 1960s style spaghetti western, acid western type of book. It's set in an alternate reality, Wild West, you could say, where really it's actually very similar to Talislanta in some respects. It's a post-apocalyptic setting, and we're really dealing with a world right now that is there's been big floods and got a lot of problems. But for the most part, if you have ever seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly or any movie like that, you kind of will get the setting. It's just this does also have other elements that doesn't. It's got some magical realism, got a little bit of what do you call steampunk in there, and it's I think it's interesting. I really enjoyed working on the book, and we are gonna try to make a role playing game out of it. In fact, I'm probably I guess about 3/4 of the way into that project right now, writing wise.
Okay. So, for those unfamiliar, how do you define acid western?
Acid Western is sort of an anti-Western. They were popular during the '60s when lots of people were kind of pretty much rebelling against almost everything that they thought was wrong. And this is the beginning of the uh, women's rights movement, the ecology movement. So they did the same thing when it came to film, in a lot of different categories of film. But in terms of westerns, the people that were starting to do this were like, "Ugh, we hate old westerns. Let's do something different." Uh, Different in the case of spaghetti westerns, as if you're familiar with it, you can see is that there's more anti-heroes than there ever are heroes in a spaghetti western or Italian western. Acid westerns tried to take that one step further, and they added a lot of 1960s style drug use and characters from that type of era, hippie kind of era. It's actually very fun, and yeah, if you're not a fan of traditional westerns, you probably would like this. I would guess. I know I do. I love this style stuff.
So, can you give us examples of acid western movies that people might have heard of?
The one off the top of my head would be El Topo by Alexander Jodorowsky. It's way out there, but there were a few others. I don't think any of them were really really popular. They weren't as popular as the spaghetti westerns were, but they have that same kind of vibe. But like I said, it starts to really move into like the Timothy Leary psychedelics. Even it gets really out there. Blood Vendetta, the novel, doesn't go there with the entire book. There's a character who lives there named Indiego, and he's a shaman. And his pretty much anytime he shows up, things get kind of psychedelic or something like similar. The other two characters, main characters, and all three of them have sworn vendettas for one reason or another. The other, one of the other ones is named. The only thing they call him is the Vigilante, and he is a bounty hunter and likes to say that he's only in it for the money, pretty much. The other one is a Nihanese assassin, female assassin, and Nihan being the old name for Japan, and her name is Ima Omari. She is after trying to get I won't say revenge, but some payback, I guess, for another group of assassins that killed her father, who was himself an assassin. But it seems like, although that's what she's going for, she's also really, really mad at her girlfriend, her lover at the time, who cheated on her. So, one second here, because I got to, somebody trying to get in, Dan, on the Q&A.
Oh, okay.
Let me just answer this. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Yep, you were saying, Dan?
Okay. There was a western I saw with Johnny Depp a while back that seemed like it might have been a newer Astrid western. What was it? It was
Oh, Dead Man.
Dead Man. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, that's like in the similar category.
Okay. Yeah, so I pretty good at what you're talking about here. Um, what is the nature of the apocalypse that happened in this setting?
It's not entirely clear what caused it. It's a worldwide phenomena. Certainly looks like the real the after effects of like some serious climate change, but it's not politically mentioned in that way. It's almost mentioned biblically with floods and earthquakes, and so what we have is similar to Talislanta, or I should say similar to the Savage Land game. There's not much of anything left for governments. So what was America is now just a bunch of sort of towns, and both coasts were basically swamped, flooded. Parts of the southlands of the United States was flooded. So we really have a big mess. But what it's convenient for us because we have a really big Wild West now. Pretty much the whole country is like that, and much of the world.
Okay. Is there what was the technological level of advancement prior to the apocalypse, and is there any of that technology left for people to discover?
Well, it's because it's an alternate reality. The technology in this era never really got past about early 1800s. There are a couple of people in different countries that are sort of now figuring out the steam engine, and there's a guy in the book who is one of those. Also, there's in Cathay, which is the old name for China, there are Cathayan alchemists, and there are Cathayan what I call mechanists, who are making clockwork things. None of this stuff is widespread yet, so it's not really a steampunk book, but it's the kind of setting where that is starting to exist. And if you were playing it as a game, you could say, hey, I want to put more steampunk in, or you could say, hey, I don't really like steampunk, whatever. So the game's going to be pretty open-ended with regard to that. It'll be there if you want to use it, some of it.
Okay. How supernatural is the setting?
That's also left a little bit to the interpretation of the reader. The character Indiego, who I forgot to mention, his mother was a fortune teller. She was killed in what looks like just like an insane shootout that occurred in a cantina with a bunch of really bad bandits. But he has a spirit guide named Raven, and he is a believer. He ends up getting paired up with the vigilante, who is absolutely not a believer, and that they have that kind of issue of going back and forth. But it's apparent that some type of shamanic magics work in this setting. It's not where it's so widespread that there's not wizards and magicians running around, but there are things that happen that appear to be magical, even if the vigilante doesn't believe it.
Okay. Let's see here. So you said early 1800s, so that's actually before what people consider the Wild West. Do you have things like cartridge ammunition, the sort of thing people would ordinarily associate with the Western?
We have a weird connection here, Dan. Can you repeat that last one again?
Sorry, I'm getting kind of an echo. So generally speaking, westerns tend to take place between like the post Civil War period up until like the 1890s.
Yes.
And they usually include weapons that have cartridge ammunition, like the Peacemaker and the Winchester rifle. You said the early 1800s though? When it
Yeah, I'm sorry. I probably should have said early to mid, but and it's not specified exactly. Definitely have cartridge ammo. We don't have a lot of popular brands from that era actual, but there are fictitious companies that make these weapons in the Blood Vendetta milieu, and some of those start to verge towards being a little more I don't want to say fantastical, a little more steampunkish, but it's not like steam powered guns and stuff. It's pretty. The way it's described in the book is just very, like I said, very much like a spaghetti western. It doesn't get into huge amounts of detail. We'll probably have to get into a little more detail when we get to the role playing game. But yeah, if you're used to six guns and rifles and shotguns and Gatling guns and that kind of stuff, they're all in here.
Okay. Are there any supernatural entities? Well, you mentioned like a spirit guide. Are there any supernatural creatures that?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Look, again, it's sort of like the reader's kind of trying to figure this out for himself, as the characters are also. It does appear like there's some ghosts. Two of the three main characters run into something that is very, very horrible, and I don't know if I should give it away or not, but it's a supernatural entity. So there are things, and the other thing I'm doing is sort of incorporating some of the Western legends of weird creatures like jackalopes. That stuff is in there too. So there's some sort of Western mythology, bestiary additions, you could say, and definitely there is a supernatural element that at least these shamans and the like have access to.
Were you inspired at all by Stephen King's Dark Tower series?
I was really disappointed by it myself, because when I read the first 3 pages, I thought this is going to be the greatest thing that was ever written. Yeah. I was really excited. I'm like, oh man! I forget what page I got to, like page 6, 7, 8, 9 or something. I was all right, that's kind of petering out, and it's not really going to be an exciting Wild West kind of a thing. It's going to be, I don't know, what is that, multi-dimensional? I actually lost track of it after a little while, but you can't really tell by me because I'm not a Stephen King fan. I'm not big, almost nothing that he's done am I getting excited about. But that just from a writer's style perspective, not storytelling.
Speaking of writing, is this your first actual novel, or have you done novels before?
I would call this my first actual novel, because although there is one out there, and it was Talislanta based, and it's called Tales of the Rogue Magician. But I wrote that back in, man, I think I would, if I had to guess, I'd say 1987 or something weird like that. And at the time, I was a diehard Jack Vance fan, and that was the first writing that I ever really did that wasn't game related. And so I was really trying to emulate Jack Vance. And when I dug this manuscript out a while back, when we were doing the Epic edition with Chris Batarlis, I found it and I said, I don't like it. So I went back and I fixed a few things, and I said, well, I like it as sort of a Jack Vance copy, if I don't know, or an homage, if you want to get, be fancy. Because that's really what it was. It was my first venture into it, and a couple of the sections of that novel I think were based on short stories that I'd already written for Talislanta. So never did anything with it. Basically put it in a drawer somewhere, so to speak, and didn't really pull it out until we did the Epic edition. So I don't really consider it a novel. I mean, I guess it is because it's long enough, but it's more like a series of like vignettes that are sort of tied together. Blood Vendetta is I would say it's a real novel.
What would you say that you find more challenging, writing a role-playing game or writing a novel?
Well, I guess for me, I'd have to say novel. I mean, obviously a lot of challenges in trying to write a role playing game too, and particularly the way always tried to do it, which is, well, Dan, I don't, hardly any emphasis on rules in the games that I write. I try to make them as simple as possible, and like 90% of the emphasis is on the milieu, and basically filling all that out. That's kind of what's going on in Blood Vendetta, the RPG that I've started to work on. It's very simple rules, and then the rest of it you have to sort of fill in, your because it's a different reality. It's not like saying, "Hey, this takes place in the real Old West. You remember that from the movies. Here you go." You sort of have to describe what the conditions are in the world, what was the United States now, what does it look like now. So that's a challenge role playing game wise. The novel stuff I thought was way harder for me because I was really critical. After Rogue Magician, I didn't write anything for a real long time. I started working on Blood Vendetta, or what would become Blood Vendetta, maybe 5 years ago. But I would literally write like 3 or 4 sentences and stop. And I'd say, "Oh, I like these 3 or 4 sentences," and then try to write the 5th sentence or 6th, whatever it was, and go like, "Ugh." And I got so critical, I would just keep stopping myself until I figured out something like that was like really important to me, and maybe it's a good idea for other writers too. And a lot of most writers already know this, and it's kind of like duh that I didn't or wouldn't accept it or whatever. But from writing music for a living for over 25 years now, I had picked up a work. How you put this? As a process. When I'm writing music, I don't care if my first draft stinks. If there's anything in it, first draft of a piece of music, if there's anything in it that's good, I won't throw it out. I'll put it off to the side, come back to it later, that kind of thing. But most of the time, if I'm writing something, it never really starts out great, writing music. And as you work on it, oh, wow, now I'm getting it, And that's sort of what I had. I never really, connected that to writing words, to writing a novel or short story thing. And once I did, just like, the idea being like, write your first draft, then go back and fix the crappy parts, Once I started being less critical that way, it helps you get it done. Then you go back and then fix things. And that's what I had been doing for 25 years for music. It just didn't occur to me that maybe I could do that as a writer also. So duh, again.
Yeah, I find when I do writing, even when I'm just doing a game review, I kind of describe it for me as like sculpting, and the first process is just kind of like vomiting out words that are like the raw clay, and then go back and shape them into something that makes more sense.
Right. And that's what I kind of had to talk myself into. But also I had wanted to do that because if it's too crappy, I can't write. You know what I mean? It's like it's discouraging. So somewhere along the line, about 10, 15, maybe more, 15 years ago, I started to read. I read Cormac McCarthy, and Cormac McCarthy. I don't know if you're familiar with any of his stuff. But if you have not read Blood Meridian, you should read it. It's a great novel, and his style of writing is like, man, it's just he sounds like nobody else. But it just gave me some ideas. Like, it's kind of a cool way to approach writing about the West. It has this more of a, I use the word biblical, but I don't mean it literally, but it has it's what's the word? It's kind of heavy, it's sententious. It's not like, hey, happy-go-lucky, hey, partner, let's go, Right. And that style connected in my head with spaghetti westerns, because spaghetti westerns are not usually happy-go-lucky. There were some comedic ones that came out later, but the early ones were not happy-go-lucky type things, It was a pretty dark kind of a approach to telling a story about supposedly the West, and that helped me. You do have to find. Let's talk about finding a voice, and that's what I needed to do for this. And it took me a really long time, but once I kind of found what I wanted to do, then I was like, oh, okay. And then again, once I stopped being so critical of every single word that I wrote, I wrote this whole thing in about, well, what is it, 72,000 words, 75,000, I forget. And I think we got most of it done in about 3 months, 4 months maybe.
Now, when you create a role-playing game, you kind of have to put the whole setting together to give it like something for the GMs to play with. Did you shape the whole setting together for this world as if you were creating a role-playing game, and then you create the story in it, or did you kind of discover things about the setting as you wrote?
Kind of both, because it's set in what's way more similar to the real world than Talislanta is. I don't have to come up with a name for a creature that I want to be something like a horse. It's a horse. It's good. And I had, you have existing maps obviously to work from, and so I didn't have to sit down and write a whole or design a whole milieu first before writing. I knew what I wanted to do, and I'll put it this way: I had a canvas to work with that I didn't have to create from scratch. So that was very helpful. But also, as you just said, as I went along too, I would say, wow, I need to do something about this over here. I want my characters to go here. What's that going to look like? So then, you have to stop for a few minutes and go like, okay, I'm not writing it really about actual Mexico. My Mexico is called Texarkana. So I better figure out a little bit more about that. And as the thing developed too, I was trying to figure out, I don't really know what the entire world looks like, but I have a pretty good idea of what Nihon and Cathay is like now. I'm already working on the sequel. In the sequel, the Barbary pirates get involved, so I'm starting to work on that side of the world, and it's really fun. And I really like that I'm not having to write everything, straight from my imagination. We have real, like I said, real horses, real, birds, vultures, whatever. I don't have to do all that. Talislanta was a huge effort to do that. Everything you had to make up.
Yeah, speaking of which, on the off chance that somebody listening to this is unfamiliar, can you give just like a high-level overview of what Talislanta is?
Dan, again, we're having a little issue with picking up your call. What were you asking?
I said, since on the off chance that someone's not familiar with the Talislanta, can you give like a very high-level description of what Talislanta is?
Sure, I could try. I don't know. I think Talislanta is just really one of the weirder fantasy games ever. If you are familiar with something like Empire of the Petal Thrones, you'll understand. If you compare the two, they're both sort of just they don't use Western mythology or Eastern mythology or any existing mythology. Both of those games, like Talislanta, we create an entire mythology, an entire history, entire world. And Talislanta, when I first created it, I was also really trying very hard. And I just come from creating another game called Atlantis, or Atlantean Trilogy, we called it. And in that game, I guess I have a bad attitude when it comes to things that are just really only from a Western point of view, and particularly only from a Caucasian Western point of view. I've always just been like, why is that? We have a whole world. Why does everything have to be through this perspective? And no offense to Tolkien's stuff, which I love, but it's it's kind of Caucasian Western fantasy. So starting with Atlantis, I decided I'm gonna try to include a whole lot of other mythologies. And if you've seen Atlantis, you'll see that's it's kind of, again, it's set in a so-called real ancient world. Although we had a lot of things like Atlantis, for instance, but it's all about all the other cultures too. And Jerry Grayson, I think, owns the rights to Atlantis now, and that's he really took that and ran with it and done a great job with it. But that was my idea. So getting to Talislanta, I brought the same idea, and I said I'm not doing actual Western mythology. And so I really I hate to put it this way, Dan, but I'll try to say it. I have no use for Caucasians in this game, So I really decided everybody's going to be everything but a Caucasian. They're going to be blue skin, green skin. They're going to have this. They're going to purple skin, whatever the heck it is. And that's kind of where it went. So it's a very original setting. It has no relationship to any existing, earlier kind of fantasy books. And there wasn't going to ever be a Caucasian in Talislanta until I saw something that the artist that I was working with, P.D. Breeding, she had painted this picture, and we used it on the cover. We ended up using it on the cover of the encyclopedia, and that character is pretty white-skinned, and it was such a beautiful piece. I said, "Hey, can I use this? Can I pay you for this?" And she said, "Yeah, go ahead." And I said, "Okay, now I got to come up with some white guys for Talislanta." So that's kind of where that went. And but yeah, I don't know. I think that kind of describes it. Just to add for gamers, the magic system is very different, also, and the rule system is minute compared to what the milieu is. The rule system is intentionally as simplified as I could make it back then, and so that players and game masters who wanted to try this game wouldn't just get, they'd be just overwhelmed. The amount of material in Talislanta that's milieu setting related is intimidating enough. It's massive. So I wanted to make the rules very simple. You can learn the rules in like 20 minutes. Okay, here's how we do it. Okay, great. Now we got to concentrate on learning about all these green skin cultures and peoples and all this other crazy crap. So that's sort of the viewpoint of it. Does that make sense, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So speaking of the rules, can you give a high-level description of the system and, if possible, how it's going to apply to the Blood Vendetta game?
You want me to do that as regards the Blood Vendetta RPG that's in development, or the Talislanta? Because actually, yeah, which do you prefer the emphasis on?
Well, it was my understanding that Blood Vendetta is going to use the Talislanta system. Is that accurate? Is it going to be something?
Yeah, that's pretty true. Where I am with it right now is I tried to pull away from this system and try to just do something with different types of dice, and to kind of indicate character capabilities based on what die they're rolling. If they're rolling a D6, they're an extra. Oh, that's the other thing about Blood Vendetta. It's going to go away from Talislanta a little bit because we're really treating it in a cinematic way. So the game master will be called the director, and we have main characters, which are player characters, and everybody else is sort of supporting character all the way down to extras. And as you know, if you watch any movies at all, extras don't last long, whether it's on Star Trek or whether it's on any Western movie you've ever seen or spaghetti Western. So I had started off with a system that I was just calling it a die versus die system, and I was messing with it for a little while, and then I said, you know what? I like my old action table thing. I think I'll just use that. So that's where I'm at with it now. I'm probably just going to stick with the action table. I'm rewriting some of the rules to try to make them even simpler, and then we're going to try to add features that are, to me, I think this would be the hippest thing you could do, is to add features that connect more to the milieu, and also the spaghetti Western, acid Western, that whole landscape or series of movies, genre, whatever you want to call it. How you act in those movies, can we replicate that in a game? So I want players acting like, be able to act like Clint Eastwood if you want, and how would that be? How do you get to describe that with rules? There's a lot of other characters in those games in those movies that are pretty out there. Dead Man got some pretty crazy characters in there. So we want to try to make it more cinematic, and some of the rule writing is really set up that way that we're talking about. Like, you're doing for the player, you have your own main character. It's almost like you're an actor, So we're talking about your character. What would your character do here? It's almost like you have a chance to pretend you're acting the character out. So that we're going to do a little more emphasis on that. Other than that, I would say, yeah, pretty much, very much, I should say, like Talislanta system. The magic system will be much simpler, much stripped down. It's not going to nowhere near as elaborate as Talislanta, and that's going to be based very much on, I guess you would say, I don't know how to put this, more traditional type, what we think of magic from a shamanistic perspective and early alchemy perspective, more based on that rather than the Talislanta thing, which was based on all crazy deities that we made up, or maybe they weren't even deities, that kind of thing.
So, can you give a basic description of the action table and how, if at all, it's going to work differently in Blood Vendetta?
It's going to work almost the same as it does in Talislanta. We'll have critical failures and those kind of things, and partial success and breakdown. But it's all based on just a D20. Same kind of idea where you'll get to add your skill rating to it. Going to vary, even more so be focused on degree of difficulty from the point of the game master, director in this case, trying to say, okay, what are you trying to do? Here's how hard is that? How easy is that, based on who you are, based on what you're trying to do. So we're going to make that more a part of the game. I want the director and the characters to interact on that way. But other than that, yeah, we're rolling a D20. You add your skill rating, and I think we'll definitely have bonuses for attributes. Probably the same attributes, maybe a couple less, but right now I'm working with 6 that are in the Talislanta system, and we might go up. I think the Tal system has 8, if I'm not mistaken.
Do you plan on going with the Talislanta system as it exists in the Epic Edition, and translate it to as the basis for Blood Vendetta, or are you drawing upon an earlier edition, or are you just kind of making it its own thing?
Yeah, I think every time, that's a good question, because every time I've used that system, I've been in a different frame of mind, if you want to say, and it's like, okay, I like that, but I should have done it this way, or I did this, but this part sucks, or what? How can I make this more fun, or do I need this many words to describe this? So there's going to be that kind of adaptation. I actually like the Savage Land rules best, in a sense, but Savage Land, Talislanta Savage Land had no magic, so it made it a lot easier to deal with as a game designer. But yeah, we'll probably just keep pretty much the same thing as I would say, that trying to take the best from the Epic and Savage Land versions of the system, and again try to streamline it a little bit more if I can. There's not too much more fat I can cut off it, but I think there's probably some, and then definitely add some features to it that are more related to the setting and to the type of characters you'll find in the setting. But one thing that I could tell you I just started messing around with was something. I don't really have a good name for it, I don't think, but I'm calling it attribute swapping. It's sort of a character who's in any situation. You don't have to use the particular skill that maybe is most logically going to be something like, for instance, you get in a gunfight, somebody challenges you to a gunfight. You would think, all right, well, here we go. It's, Dan's rolling with his, shooting or whatever his skill versus mine. But what I'm trying to set up is we don't have to do that. If I'm a different type of character, I might try to talk you. I might use more of a charisma or persuasiveness type of a skill to talk you out of it and say, hey man, let me buy you believe
you're actually
it.
breaking up right now.
And I think that's going to be fun. What's that?
So can you repeat that? You're breaking out there for a second.
Oh, where was I? That you were under me to repeat just the swapping.
Yes.
Yeah, basically to allow characters based on the type of character you are, you decide how you're going to handle any confrontation, rather than it's an automatic thing. We're just automatically shooting at each other. Your character may not want to do that. Your character may be a lot better at trying to uh, convince someone that it would be in their best interest to not shoot you because you'll do something for them or whatever. But also be able to do that, to have a mechanism there where I'm going to use my charisma or whatever. I'll use that for an example. That my charisma is the thing I want to roll against. You're getting ready to roll against me with your pistol, but I'm going to try to do something different. So I think it would be, if I can get it to work right, it would be a real nice way to emphasize your role playing your character, rather than just say, okay, we're rolling, everybody's fighting. Let's start roll. Oh, I got this with a knife. You got that with a bow and arrow. That's all good too, but I would like to see, or at least give players a chance to try to use their role playing attributes, create a mechanism where those role playing attributes can affect what's going to happen in any kind of encounter or event in the game.
Yeah, I think the way I usually describe that when I'm reviewing a game is that in some systems the attributes are what I call hard linked to a given skill,
Mm-hmm.
and in other games, what attribute you're using depends upon how you're using the skill, which sounds like what you're going for with Blood Vendetta.
Yeah, that's what we're going to try to do. So yeah, if you're a bounty hunter, you can be a bunch of different types of bounty hunters. We have bounty killers in the games too. That there's no interest in this dead or alive kind of thing. It's dead for them. It's just easier. We have people who don't really, they're pretty immoral. But we have other people who have different shades of morality and may prefer. Or, I also in the Blood Vendetta book, there's a little speech given by Ima Omari's master, who taught her how to be an assassin. Excuse me. And it describes the type of assassins and what they do. I think he lists like 5 types, and there's everything from oh man, I don't have them all handy offhand, but basic. Oh yeah, I think he describes one type as artistes, people who do it as they're assassinating a certain way, and then but his oh yeah, there's sadists. There's a few other ones, but his ideal is the professional who always just does the job. But one of the other types is, I think, something like, it's not called a crusader. That's the wrong term for it, but I forget what they are. But they have like a code of honor. I'm an assassin, but I have a code of honor. I don't kill kids. I don't kill those kind of things. So I want to find ways to tie that into, tie a mechanism into that, so that if you're playing your character, there's advantages and disadvantages to playing who you are, rather than just a cookie cutter. Oh, he's a gunslinger. Oh, he's a lawman, or he's a whatever. That's the idea anyway.
You mentioned trying to go for a more cinematic experience. One thing that people mentioned to me when I was talking about when I discussed Talislanta is the lack of what I've heard called the meta currency, which is kind of like a fate point / hero point / drama point system, where you have a set number of points you can spend to improve a roll, for example, or reroll or something like that. Do you plan on using anything like that in this system?
Again, Dan, we're having some really bad problems with the connection here. So you were asking me a question about something. What was it? What did you call it? Vibrancy?
I'm sorry. Let me try again. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead. It's not you. It's just our connection here. It seems to.
Yeah, I got you. No, it's. I was asking about what I've heard described as a meta currency, which
Okay, meta currency, you said?
yeah, I've seen them called fate points, drama points, hero points, points that
Right.
you have a pool of points you can spend to affect the system in certain ways, like giving yourself a bonus to attempting something, or giving yourself a reroll to try again to do something. Uh, do you plan on using anything like that to make the game more cinematic?
Uh, I think by cinematic, really talking about the way the rules are discussed in part, and also trying to encourage the characters to act as if they're in a movie, and to, you know, if you're a main character in this game, it's sort of like being a hero in D&D. Except in D&D you start, with that first level where you get your one magic missile spell or whatever the heck that, if I remember correctly. But in this game, you are starting. You're already somebody. So who is that somebody? Are you, a somewhat well-known gambler, a somewhat well-known, murderer, robbers? What are you? A bounty hunter? And to encourage people to find a role for yourself and play it, and use your characteristics the way you would if you were that character. I don't see additional roles. I'm not thinking of anything like drama points that you could drop in there. Um, Mainly, what I hope it to do is, again, I'm really thinking in my head. I'm thinking the good, the bad, and the ugly, and another movie called Red Sun, which I don't know if you saw, Dan, but it's really cool, and it's Toshiro Mifune and Charles Bronson, and it's a real East meets West Western. I think it might be the first. If it's not the first one, it's among the first couple of ones. And those characters have really different personalities, and that's kind of what I want to do. Can we get you the players to enjoy playing who they envision themselves, and to make the mechanics in a very simple way support that? That's the idea.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on how the magic system is going to work in the role-playing game? I suspect it's going to be less flashy than Talislanta.
I haven't gotten to the magic rules yet, but in my head, yeah, again, it's going to be based more on shamanistic type things that we will allow players who have this ability to do. It's probably going to be more ritual based than spell based, although there will be some kind of spells. I also want to leave it a little loose in terms of the actual definitions of some things, to let people sort of like try to play with them. I don't have a firm idea in my head. Probably there will be like some spell type things. There will be some things you can do up on yourself. And I guess the best example of it would be from the early Talislanta games. There was a certain type of magic we called primitive magic, and it was pretty much based only on what shamans do or can do. So probably going to lift a bunch of that and adapt it, because I thought most of that worked really well. It just probably needs to be rewritten, rephrased, some of the terms.
One thing, when you mentioned streamlining, one issue I kind of had, especially in the Epic Edition, I mentioned this in our review of the Talislanta game, is that the basic system is very simple, but it has a really extensive skill list.
Yes.
Have you thought about cutting down other skills, making them more generalized?
Yes, for sure. And it's a great point, and that is exactly what I've thought about. And it reminds me, there is one other game that I wrote a system for. I don't know if anybody out there knows what it is, but it was called Pandemonium at the time. And it had a really simple rules system, and I mean, it was even simpler than Talislanta. It was nutty how simple it was. But one thing I did like it is what you just said. The skills were more generalized. And in Pandemonium, it just said, you're a airplane pilot, so you know everything about airplanes. or you're a plumber. It actually literally said that at one point because all the characters in Pandemonium, that was supposed to be like a weird real world setting, also had day jobs or former jobs. So you didn't have to say, well, do you know about plumbing? Do you know about your electrician? You know about anything an electrician would know, you would know. So I want to try to find a way to do that also to keep that. Yeah, I don't like that skill list, man, either. It's, you end up doing it in a fantasy role playing game because there's so many weird things you could do and you kind of have to describe them all. Then you put spells in there and now everything is like 300, lists of 200 things, 300 things, 100. And yeah, I really want to try to avoid that. So, if you're a gunslinger, you ought to know what the things you should do, you're able to do. Um, can you acquire skill? That's when it gets a little tricky when you also want to give players a chance to acquire a new skill. So you do have to list some, but yes, going to absolutely make them as general as possible.
Yeah, I'm actually a fan of that kind of skill setup. I call it, for lack of a better term, a holistic skill.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen several games. You mentioned Pandemonium. Is that the tabloid game?
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was yours.
Yeah, that was me, all right. And a very good friend of mine, Joel K. We wrote that together. We were just trying to be silly and funny. And what's funny is I really can't call it Pandemonium anymore because we sold the name.
Right.
That's the only thing we made money off of.
But yeah, I've seen several games that use a profession as a kind of holistic skill.
Yep.
The one that I think is probably most popular these days is Barbarians of Lemuria, which is has actually been used. The system's been used for multiple settings now. Are you familiar with that at all?
I am not, except for the Conan reference, but yeah.
Yeah, so basically, you don't have skill lists at all. What you have is every character has four past professions that have a rating, like a skill rating, and anything that someone in that profession could do, you would use that score for to see if you can attempt it. And another game that actually might be more like what you're going for is it's not very well known. It's a game called Heaven and Earth, and it's kind of designed to be a like a Twin Peaks kind of setting. But
Wow.
what they do is they have professional skills that work the way we're describing, where anything that falls under the profession you use that score for, and they have also specific skills on top of that. So if you're a policeman, you have a policeman skill, and you can do anything that a policeman can do. And
right.
But then you might also have singing or something specific like that doesn't fall under a policeman. And then so to your point, you could actually buy these independent skills separately from your primary holistic skill.
Right. And that's sort of the aim, but that's also the complication. Where what you just said, what I just said before that is that you want to have these. We use your term holistic, profession skill sets or whatever it might be. But if you want to leave anything open, like hey, this gambler might want to be really good with a bow and arrow for some reason or whatever,
Right.
Then you do have to start listing skills, and that's where it can go off the rails there, man. Unless you're really, really disciplined about and thoughtful about which skills you want to be able to add as add-ons. This setting, at least for me, kind of narrows down some of the things you can do a little bit, makes it a little easier to handle. The way that Savage Lands made it easier to handle that system, because I never had to worry about magic. So I think while there is going to be some magic in it, I think that's the idea, is to find these more like skill sets Uh, and archetypes were sort of like that in Talislanta anyway. But again, there were just so many crazy ones. Was like 150 or plus or something archetypes. It's insane. So we're not going to be doing that kind of crazy business. We try to keep it a lot more digestible, and also because it's related to things that most people have seen westerns of some sort. So it's a little easier to get you started in this game than from Talislanta, where just you're coming in and there's nothing familiar at all anywhere.
Speaking of the archetypes, when it comes to character creation, do you plan on going with the archetype system, or do you plan on doing something more like Talislanta 5e, where you actually build the character, or have you given that much thought yet?
In starting this, I wanted to make sure that we didn't have, the thing about archetypes you has to be careful. It was very helpful in Talislanta again, and that was another shortcut because there was so much stuff to learn. Going into that, and nothing applies to it except whatever you might know about, swords and things like that. So I wanted to. I do. We are going to start with either a profession or an archetype, but going to do a character creation thing at the beginning of that, or right after you pick. Oh, I want to be I'm just going to make this up, but I want to be a lawman, and then probably let the players give them a short list of things to pick. Virtues and vices is something that I was working with the other day, and that you have to have at least one of each. And your vices don't have to be like, oh, I'm a drug addict every time, but it's got to be something it's almost like your Achilles heel in a way. Again, doesn't have to be life threatening for every character. It can be seemingly mild, but you have a chance to pick some of these things, or you can roll on them. We used to like it when we fooled around with some of the early D&D stuff, where you could kind of roll. What kind of thing do I know, or do I have those kind of things? So some people really like that. It's fun. It doesn't take a world of time to create a character. Yeah, that's what we're going to be shooting for. Simplicity of an archetype with some more personalization than you see in Talislanta. There was no room for personalization in the original Talislanta. There was just too much going on, and it was like I said, a very conscious effort on my part to try to limit the amount of time you had to spend before you could even start a game.
Sounds reasonable.
I hope so.
Yeah. Going back to the setting, are there Native American analogs in the or literal American Indians in the setting, or
No, it's not. It's not literal. In fact, I was just working on writing a description of how I wanted to portray this. But in the book, there are tribes of people known as indigens, similar to the word indigenous. It's actually a Jack Vance word too, I believe. And they represent. First of all, they aren't Native Americans. They appear to be one of the more Talislanta-ish kind of things. They have different skin colors. There are some white, very like bone white characters, and other peoples. Other are very, very, very dark skinned black. There's even there's a zebra striped tribe, and the idea is that they're really going to represent, in my mind, as they did in the book, indigenous peoples all over the world, and how they have been exploited, how they've had lands and resources stolen from them, and how it's still going on in different parts of the world right now. So there is that kind of connection to it, and those are more native civilizations, but there is no one-to-one with Native Americans. No.
So that brings up another point. I'm trying to get a handle on this based on what you're describing the setting. To what degree does it resemble the real world, or is it just completely different? I mean, was there a United States or something similar, for example?
Yeah, there was something like a United States here, and it fell apart, and then there was a United City States, and it during all these calamity. It's one of what's called the Big Calamity. For Talislanta fans, you probably get a little laugh out of that, but that's what people refer to it as. Pretty much all these countries in North America, these states rather, that all fell apart, and we're at the town level now. There's a couple of bigger towns. What used to be New York is now called Old York, but most of the eastern coast is underwater. Rhode Island is called the Isle of Rhodes because it is an island. Things like that. Half of California fell into the sea finally because of an earthquake. So it's easy to get your head around what's going on here, because really what we mainly have left is deserts, swamps, of course mountains. But it's a very, very dry world where water is in most places is worth as much as gold, and we don't have oil barons. We have water barons, that kind of stuff.
Is it a water-based economy, for lack of a better term, or is it like a barter economy?
There's still gold. People are still buying things, but people also do barter. But people now have to buy water, and there's two types of water in the Western lands, which is what I call it now. And one is I forget what it's called. Is it called? It's not called aquavit. What's it called? I don't have it in front of me. But it means pure water, clean water, and everything else is called stump water. And stump water is probably potable. Probably you could drink it, but it's the kind of stuff people pull up out of ditches after very rare rains, that kind of thing. It's what most poor people subsist on, and this game is also very much about the poor people in the way. The book, I should say, not the game, but the book is very much about how poor people are and have always been exploited by rich people. So there's some commentary in this novel. I think a couple of sharp swings, kicks here and there at things. It's not the main point of the novel, but there are characters who express the fact that, there are thief characters who express their opinion that it's the people like the water barons who are the greatest, bandits and robbers in the world, not them.
Okay.
That's a very 60s thing too, by the way.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do you plan on making this an entire game line, or is it going to be more of a one-off game?
What was the second half of that question again, Dan?
Do you plan on making an ongoing game line out of Blood Vendetta, or do you see it more of just like a one book and done kind of thing?
I think it's probably going to be a one book game. I could get back to that because particularly after the Epic edition, there's unbelievable amount of work went into that, and I was really supposed to mostly just be a creative director and like, okay, let's do that, or no, we can't do that kind of thing. And I ended up doing a lot of writing in that, and those books are, as you know, are massive. The costs on it were massive. It was not a big money-making project at all because everything cost so much. There was so much art in it. Chris wanted to do it that way. I say, Chris, he said, I want to do the epic version. I said, you really? So, yeah, we did the epic version, but this is not going to be epic. I'm going to try to keep this way more reasonable also because I would like it not to be so expensive. If people want to try it out, I don't want them to have to drop, $100. So, yeah. One book. Hopefully that's it.
Okay. Let's see. If there's anything else I had to ask. I guess, is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to bring up?
Let me think about that. I think you did a pretty good job of covering the main stuff here, Dan. So I'm definitely, the book is going to be a series. I don't know how many books are going to be in the series. I know there's going to be at least 2 because I'm like 70,000 words into the sequel already. So that's going to happen. But Yeah, I think that's pretty much, without having other people here to think of
Right.
questions you and I never thought of. Yeah, I think we must have covered this as well as we could.
Oh, I guess is there an ETA yet for the game?
Not yet, no. I still have work to do because the other thing is with this is ever since Talislanta, and even actually ever since Atlantis, I'm really, really, what's the word? It's a real, really important to me, the visuals of the game,
Hmm.
because without providing some visual elements, people they have that in their own head, and I don't want people walking around if they're going to try the Blood Vendetta game. I don't know why I'm thinking of John Wayne movies. The characters in this world don't really look like characters from regular westerns at all. They do look like characters from acid westerns in some ways, but we have a real racial mix, and the intermix of people thanks to these uh, diasporas and all this destruction, devastation caused by the big calamity, is really created a whole different looking world, and it's almost got a Western Mad Max feel to it in some ways. So I have to get some of that into visuals so people can see it. I just ran into something. We were talking to Mark Williams about this, and Mark has done some of the visual stuff that we've been working on so far. And his idea, he hadn't read the book yet, but his idea of what is going on in the world is based on just on our covers. That's the only visual he has, and that's the only visual anybody has right now. So yeah, we got some work to do, and I want to do that by creating some visuals that are really interesting. I have the stuff in my head, but we got to get it out of my head onto paper somehow.
Okay.
Yeah, and also without costing $42 million or
Yeah.
like the Epic Edition.
Oh, will you be doing any music yourself for the game?
Yes, we already. I'm working with Patrick Golden, who's also from the Talislanta Facebook group, and he and his wife Bev have been a long time Talislanta fans. And Patrick, first of all, really cool. Is like a death metal guitar player, which is great, and he's also done voiceover work. So he did the VO stuff on our audiobook. And when we started working on it, I said, we definitely need a theme. I'm going to write a theme. I said, well, while I'm at it, I'm going to I'll write something for every chapter, mostly what we call stings or bumpers. So the things that take, somewhere between 5 to 15 seconds. But every chapter, there's 45 chapters in the book. There's 45 of these musical theme type things, stings or whatever you want to call them. There's a closing theme, and the music. The audiobook really kind of gives you an idea what to expect in the book. I mean, in more ways than one, just the feel of the music. So yeah, we got it in there already on the audiobook. It's and it's really, I really like what we did. It's a combination of the kind of stuff you'd expect to hear in a spaghetti Western soundtrack, with death metal guitars thrown in, with Asian musical motifs thrown in, with flamenco musical motifs thrown in. And so it's really like an international and weird multicultural kind of thing. And we're probably going to we're talking about doing a soundtrack album too. But Dan, you have all these great ideas and things, and most of these things come out pretty good. But sometimes only like 12 people buy it. You know what I mean? Like, hey, that's almost the greatest soundtrack album I've ever heard. Thanks. But you're like the 11th person that bought it, So we'll see. We'll see how much further. Right now, we think we're doing it. And I really enjoyed working with Patrick, and I really enjoyed doing the music that's in the audiobook. And you can hear all those, anyone who wants to check it out, I can hear I think samples of the beginning of almost every chapter, if not every one, over on that Piscean Creed website, which you'll see in the stuff that we put in the Facebook, the little ads and things in the Facebook group, Blood Vendetta Facebook group. So want to check that out. You can do so for free. See if it's something that you like.
Are you familiar with a band called Ghoul Town?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, I think you would like them as maybe some inspiration for music for Blood Vendetta. I forget what they describe themselves as, but they're basically like a Western heavy metal
Mm-hmm.
cult band. They just they use
Oh, wait, I think I do know who you're talking about. Yeah, I think I've heard these guys.
yeah.
Well, that's more metal than we are. That's like if I have the same guys you're talking about, they're like real metalhead kind of. Yeah, ours. We've got the Ennio Morricone stuff in there too.
Gotcha.
We have the mariachi trumpets and the whistling, and so it's a real mix. I think it works well as part of reinforcing what the Blood Vendetta milieu is about by listening to it. You say, oh wow, yeah, isn't that a Chinese instrument I'm hearing or a Japanese? Yes, it is, and yeah, that makes sense because we have Nihonese / Japanese, Cathayan / Chinese characters in the book too.
Okay, very good.
So yeah, love it, love doing it. Hope we can do more.
Okay, good deal. Well, I guess we can go ahead and wrap up then. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, we need to find a easier way to do this online, Dan.
Yeah, we do.
I don't know whether it's Teams or something else. There's got to be some kind of cooler way to do this. But thank you very much for doing the interview. I really
Yeah, you're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
Yeah, I hope we
And
can
for
do it
bearing
on
with
Teams
us.
because Teams has the automatic transcription function, so I'd be able to post the transcription link. I don't normally also post the text transcripts of my Q&As, so that'd be a good thing to do to make that work.
I would love to be able to make anything from Microsoft work. I can't get Word to work for me. I can't I bought a copy of Word, which I need because in the publishing business, everybody uses Word. And I have not been able to get it registered for months because they have an old phone number on me in the account. I can't seem to figure out how to change it. Maybe it's because I'm old, Dan. I don't know, but I got to figure this shit out, bro. You know what I mean?
Hear you.
So we'll see.
All right. Well, just for those listening, if you've enjoyed this discussion and want to throw a little tip my way, you can do so at https://ko-fi.com/GMSHOE that's Ko-fi.com. Thanks very much, Steve, for joining us.
Thanks again, Dan, for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm going to do my best to get this posted on my blog. Last time I did one of these recordings, I had to do all kinds of conversions and stuff like that to get YouTube to accept it so I could link from my blog to YouTube, but I'll get it figured out.
I'll tell you what, man, I hope it recorded better than what we're hearing here because, we had really choppy, the reception on it was real choppy at times. So good luck with that, brother.
All right, thanks a lot. And again, you're one of my favorite game authors and one of my favorite people, so I really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it, man.
Take care.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye.